I am Nimit Bhat and you are listening to my not so profound thoughts. Today I have uh, Isabella from Mexico who is a law student and we are going to discuss about understanding universal basic income, the pros and cons of it having in developed country as well as in developing country. So hear it from Isabella.
I
Yeah.
am a Mexican law student. I have been studying for a bit over 4 years now. Um, I have dedicated my last 3 years to corporate law and some aspects of business law, especially in the last 2.5 years with a view on international corporate law and how businesses work at an international global scale, specifically within Mexico. So making this points of connection with international business and national laws in order for international relations to work within the country, within the legal perspective. Um, I also love cultures. I love languages. I am a polyglot, and thus all of this analysis of how society works and how we can make a better community is what really moves me and pushes me through.
So you also have a podcast, right?
I do not have a podcast. I have written blogs and I have my social media where I mostly speak basically in Spanish, as it's my native tongue, but about
Okay.
current laws that are being published by the Mexican government, trying to explain them at a simpler level for everyone to understand them. I also speak a little bit about culture, about social key issues that are relevant, what our local Congress is doing, and everything that involves politics and the community as a whole.
Okay. So I wanted to discuss basically regarding the universal basic income,
Mm-hmm.
the pros and cons in a developing country, as well as the difference it has in a developed country.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is your take on universal basic income? That whether every country should have based on their GDP, or there should be a universal thing about that.
Well, I believe the basic income should be held only for extraordinary circumstances because we have to understand where it comes, right? So,
Yeah,
in essence, most countries currently fall within the capitalist system, which goes completely different from what the communist system would stand. This universal basic income falls more on the socialism kind of side of economics, so it's not fully well into communism, but still goes out of the capitalist logic that we're used to, right?
yeah,
Especially for developing countries which have had a history, such as the case of my country. Mexico has had a history of going between the lines between capitalism and socialism. It's a good measurement as long as it's not a permanent measurement. And what do I mean with a permanent measurement? It's not that there should be always a universal minimal income or basic income, but rather in extraordinary circumstances, such as the one that we're living right now in a global pandemic, right?
yeah,
So, with for it to make sense within an economic system such as a capitalist economic system, it would have to be generally written enough that if anyone falls within specific circumstances, they would be entitled to receive this basic income. Therefore, it's not universal, but it's a basic income to help you get by as long as this externality of economics gets out of the way. For example, people who have been unemployed because of the pandemic, people who have had to close their enterprises, finish their new enterprise income. When the situation is completely out of hands and no longer has to do with the development or effort or work put by the party that stopped receiving this income, right?
yeah.
So, for example, in Mexico right now, there's in the Senate the proposal to have a basic income, to have a basic living stipend that's guaranteed to citizens while this pandemic lasts. Now,
Okay.
there are different takes on this. There are people that say that it should be more of a grant. There's people who are saying that it should be more of a free health money, like a handout.
Okay.
Basically, because the government's money is paid by the taxes. No, it's the money of everyone. However,
Yeah.
there's also this other point of view in which people say, okay, you give them a grant, and in about 5 years' time, when the situation restabilizes, then they can pay back the money to the government with the money that's from everyone.
Okay.
Now, the political circumstances here are kind of weird because we have our first government in a long time that's he considers himself to be a leftist, but most leftists agree that his views are more conservative, like held to the right than left.
Okay.
However, everyone assumes that he's a communist. Essentially, people assume that he's a communist when he's really a very weird mixture of ideologies, our current president. So there's people who are saying in favor of this basic income during a crisis period, but there's also people who are against it because of all the political, like being the opposition, being the current person in power, not really arguing what the objective or the end goal should be for the benefit of the people.
Okay.
So that's kind of the general standing here.
So in India currently we haven't thought this far, but Uday Kotak, who is chairman of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce, so he suggested that we should have a universal basic income. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government also thinks regarding the people, and the stimulus package which he gave currently during the pandemic was basically not direct benefits but indirect benefits in which people can sustain themselves and take the benefits, but he provided food security in a manner that the poor people don't have to pay for the food, or they just have to pay a rupee or so
Mm-hmm.
and not more than that for the whole month's food. And the whole rationing was done in this way currently in the pandemic. So there was a thought that whether there should be a universal basic income or not, because in India, so what we are facing is there is a system that we have called a reservation system,
Okay.
that is based not on income but it is based on caste.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have multiple caste system in which people are reserved. So like if I am getting admission into some college or going for a job, then if I am of certain caste, then certain seats or certain percentage of employment is reserved for me. So the system in India is such that we already have a reservation system. We have certain types of plans called Manrega, wherein 100 days of employment is guaranteed by the government and are being paid more than the minimum wages that the government has decided. So, whether a developing country should be looking towards the basic income, or we can continue for the thing that we have right now and just focus on the fiscal and monetary policy in which the small businesses may sustain more themselves.
Well, in that case, we would have to analyze what the point of the basic income should cover. So, if we
Yeah,
see it from a legal point of view, for example, I
yeah,
believe India is still based on common law, right?
yeah. So, which law?
Common law.
Yeah,
Whereas, contrary
we
to civil law, we're civil law in Mexico.
actually we have multiple laws regarding different things. It is like we have states where there is central law, which is superior to all the states' law. So whatever
Okay.
the central says, the states have to follow it.
Okay.
As well as there are some benefits given to the states wherein they can change according to the situation that is present in each state.
Okay. So,
So
for
even
example,
there,
mm-hmm.
there are some differences in taxes as well as in minimum wages also. So even every states are given some freedom, and but the central has the main idea which the central imposes, and the states are given some freedom to change whether they want to increment or decrease. So that is on the state. So we have such type of law
Okay.
right now going on. Yeah.
So, for example, in such a case, we would have to analyze what the point of such public policy for
Hmm.
the basic income would have to come into play. What your country, when the country is a developing country, what it wants to focus on, does it want to focus on economic growth and opportunity for its citizens, or does it want to focus on covering essential basic human rights, such as the access to water, the access to food, which has to do with the basic human right to health and to life.
Okay.
On the other side, if you're focusing more on a development of economic growth, then you have to be more specific in regards to what aspects of economic growth. For example, in here, you could not expect the government to not give an economic sustainment or economic help to vulnerable communities, such as indigenous communities in Mexico. Why? Because they have social, historical, and economic obstacles against them in a country that historically has had them cast aside.
Okay.
However, if it's more of a development, for example, most privileged areas in Mexico, let's say northern area in Nuevo León, which is an industrial state, which is a growing economic power in and on itself, it would have to be
Hmm.
more focused on not stopping job creation, helping still to have this economic movement instead of having it paused due to the crisis. Now, the issue at hand would be whether this universal basic income be a permanent policy or a temporal policy. Why? Because then we would be talking about an affirmative action. Why are you giving money to some people and to some people not? If you want to make a differentiation, or if you want to give a basic income to everyone, or just to people who need it to keep advancing. So that's where the key element entails if you're going to make a differentiation of the population on whether who deserves a basic income or not. Within this context of an emergency global pandemic, we would have to analyze then which limits would have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. So I'm also concerned regarding one thing,
Mm-hmm.
that if it is a temporary solution, then it is fine. But if we are looking at a permanent thing about universal basic income, that people should have a minimum wage that they are earning, whether they are employed or not.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern is regarding the inflation that happens, as well as whether people will be willing to take jobs as they are right now, or will they be enjoying on the income that they are earning and not being that productive as they used to be.
Well, that's actually an economic problem that it's studied a lot when the in academia one studies the difference between capitalism, socialism, or communism, right? The talk of the freeloader, if we say it, the person who will stop generating more for the community because they're already having the essential to live by. However,
Okay.
that's why we would have to analyze the situation. I believe that if one country wants to state an issue such as a universal basic income, it cannot be universal. It just has to be a basic income for emergencies or a vital income for cases of emergency. So the difference between vital and the difference with universal is that when we're talking about universal, we're talking that everyone receives the same amount of basic income without having consideration of different socioeconomical status or different time period or situation in which they're living through. However, when we talk about a vital income, we're saying that it's a specific group of people in need. Now, there's arguments for or against both systems. However, the issue with the inflation, it's a very key element issue because How the system with money works is based on value. So you receive
Yeah,
money when you work due to the value that you generate. And you pay for stuff with the money from the value that you already have. Things have different values, so have different works, and so have different time periods. So, for example, a
absolutely.
person that works at a fast restaurant, they'll probably receive a minimum wage in the country where they work, be it whatever amount it is. Whereas a doctor who has to have over specialized and has to have a lot of knowledge and key elements to work in that specific area, their hour cost will be much higher than the minimum wage. So
Yeah,
in here we have to analyze, for example, if it's a public policy law which wants to have a vital minimum income for the cases such as a global pandemic like the one we're living. Let's say the hospital needs more doctors, so they're going to hire more doctors. So what's the value of the hourly wage? Right now it's an emergency, so a doctor is super valuable, which is very different, for example, a retail worker who, if the company closes and the store has to shut down, they will lose their income. So in there, it has nothing to do with the person's ability to generate an income or the value that they were giving, but rather the situation that they found themselves in. So that's when governments have to come in and help have this basic income, not a universal income, but a basic essential income in order to survive the catastrophe.
yeah. So that's the main thing, that if if a person is not adding value and he's just getting money, so there will definitely be inflation and rising in the prices, which would eventually lead to decrease in the valuation of money in whatever terms you earn, either in dollars or in rupees or in any other thing. Also, I was looking at history and found that during World War II, I suppose, Germany gave its citizens lots of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that every citizen had cash during the war that was going on, and it diminished the value of that currency,
It greatly
and
diminishes the
inflation happened.
value.
Yes, it great, and the inflation skyrocketed like anything.
The more money that's circulating within society and within the community, the less value it holds because it's easier to acquire. It's
Yeah,
therefore a government cannot be just giving money handouts or printing more money because then the value of their money will completely crash, which is what happened in Venezuela.
yeah.
So,
It happened in Zimbabwe also, in few African countries, that the same thing happened, that they have a currency of almost 1 million of their own Zimbabwe's currency. So that is the amount of notes that are printed, but you still get a loaf of bread by giving that amount. So
exactly. So, for example, it's the same case in Venezuela currently, where people to buy basic food supplies, they have to have backpacks filled with cash because of the
yeah,
insane amount of devaluation their money has gone through. Of course, those are extreme examples. However, it's a situation, a very real situation that countries can get towards if not taken seriously, this sort of policies. Because a thing that a lot of countries, I think, do, especially in developing countries that have a democratic essence to them, such as the case of Mexico, with a very high number of population in a vulnerable socioeconomical situation, is they fall into populist agendas. So they promise the people easy solutions to very complex issues in order just to gain votes. And then that's just ends damaging the community. But the community, in its majority, will not see it as a damage, but more as a situation out of hand in which the government is giving me money, helping me get by, and the problem, the economical problem that's coming with it, it's completely caused by other factors. When it's not the case, it's part of the problem and it's part of the elements that play a key role into making life for the community much more harder.
So how do you think that this problem can be solved? Like a general idea, not a proper solution, but an idea that how by changing some type of policy or by changing some type of law, as you are a law student practicing that. So how do you think that it can help
Well,
in reducing inflation as well as understanding that people understand more about this basic income thing?
Well, I believe a sort of grant would be in order, or even handouts could be good in certain situations. The thing is that it would have to be accompanied with a regulation that it's general enough that anyone could fall into this situation, but you'd have to comply with very specific issues. And the key issue is not that you're unemployed because you don't want to work or because you haven't tried to get a job, but more because of a factor of being in a situation out of control due to externalities, such as the situation we're living in. So all the people who have lost their jobs, had to close businesses down, and have all these global issues falling on them that it's more than the people can handle in an economic standstill where no one is producing anything nor consuming because of an economic crisis derived from a global pandemic, then in there, yes, the government could play a key role into giving handouts or even grants that could be paid in the forthcoming years, understanding that at the end of the day, the government's money is the people's money. It's taxes paid by and for the people. And the people cannot keep on contributing to a government and helping the government generate income by paying taxes if they themselves are at an economical standstill. So, through a system of sort of grants in which give it a 5 year period or 2 year period or whatever the economic experts say that this pandemic global recession might last, then you can help give a sort of, let's call it an adrenaline injection to an economic standstill that would be
Yeah.
able to keep the country running without it actually falling out of sorts and losing the value of its money or the value of the work the citizens generate or even the will of the citizens to continue working hard to make society better with whatever area they work in, be it retail, be it a restaurant, as a doctor, as a lawyer, as an architect, whatever they can dedicate themselves to.
So I also assume one thing that right now Indian government provided the fiscal stimulus to everyone
Mm-hmm.
in an indirect form. But what we face is that currently we have two systems. One is GST, that is goods and service tax,
Mm-hmm.
that is going on in most of the products except the petroleum products. So the petroleum products right now have VAT system, that is value added taxation system.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so the government has not pushed the VAT system into uh, the GST reforms. What they are doing is in the VAT system, in the petroleum products itself, the diesel and petrol prices that we have right now consist of almost 65 to 70% of taxes
Okay.
to be paid to the central as well as the states. So right now, what happened within 3 months, I suppose, not even 3 months, let's say 2 months, the petrol prices rose to rupees 7 rupees per liter. So that was a huge drastic movement. So I assume that if we have something like giving a grant even for a temporary time period, let's say 6 months to 8 months, I would think that the taxes that the government would be charging would be tremendous, which would lead to fall in demand.
Well,
Uh,
there are countries
yeah,
right now currently that are either suspending taxes, reducing taxes, and countries that are doing nothing regarding taxes. For example, currently Mexico decided that they would not suspend taxes payment. So citizens right now still have to pay taxes, and they're even becoming a little bit more aggressive with those contributors that cannot pay fully due to the economic crisis that just befell us, right? However,
yeah,
there are countries such in Latin America, such as Chile, such as Argentina, that suspended some tax payment in order to help the citizens to have some liquidity at least, because it's not an issue on rentability. Businesses are still have their rentability. It's the liquidity issue because there's no money circulating right now. So people need to
Yeah,
retain the cash that they still have, or this cash that they will have in the future due to rentability, in order to be able to buy food, because you cannot go to the supermarket and say like, oh no, I do have rentability, I just have to wait a couple months for people to pay me what they owe me. The supermarket will tell you, no, I need you to pay for the food that you're buying right now.
yeah.
So that's basically the key issue, helping people get by and survive this crisis with policy that's general enough that any person could be fall, but with it not falling within the universality trait, because it's not for everyone. It's for people who have been affected and in the way they have been affected.
Okay. So, uh, I just wanted to ask one more thing.
Of course.
Yeah. So, like we have income tax slabs for income tax specifically. Like for if I earn less than 5 lakh per annum,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to pay income taxes. I don't have to pay income taxes. If I earn more than 5 lakhs till 10 lakhs, then I have to pay 10% of the income taxes. Suppose if I earn 6 lakh, then uh, my 5 lakhs is deducted. I don't have to pay zero tax on 5 lakhs, but I just have to pay 10,000 rupees of a tax on just the 1 lakh remaining. So we have a tax slab system like this, and it has impacted the income tax system. So, do you also have a similar system, or do you have a different system?
Well,
Like
with our
each and every person.
taxes, we have a based on income. So
Yeah.
generally, income tax is about 30%. But it also
Okay.
depends a lot on how much income you generate. So if we go to the fiscal code in Mexico, it has certain charts in which it states, for example, if your income, I really do not recall the numbers right now from my head, but let's say from 0 to 3, you are in a certain percentage lower. So it's not 30%, but it's a general lower. If you're from 4 to 6, you pay a little bit more tax in percentage, and so on and so forth. However, if you cannot prove to what would be the equivalent of the IRS here in Mexico, which we call SAT. So if you
Okay.
cannot prove to the SAT how much general income you have per month, and it's just based on annually or on an unregistered income, then the base will always be 30%.
Okay. So so uh, so it is kind of similar system that we both countries have.
It's kind of similar in that sense, which is escalonated in a certain aspect, but it's also generalized over the amount of money you receive based on a percentage.
While according to the Indian scenario, what happens is almost except the salaried person, if we include that also, 96 to 95% people don't pay income taxes here.
Okay.
They have revenue of less than 5 lakh per annum. While many of them don't have that lesser revenue, but they show it, and leading to this the whole problems in taxation, as well as the normal taxpayers are burdened with more tax or to generate the infrastructure requirement and health infrastructure and all. So we are currently facing such type of problem
Mm-hmm.
right now. So what can be the changes, or what can a country like India do further while considering all these things happening?
Well, in that case, it's more of an issue of policy compliance more than the policy on itself. Because one thing is having the laws redacted, and another thing is having people actually do what the laws tell you to do, right? It's an issue we
Yeah.
also have here in Mexico. Most laws are not fully complied with, and even if they're not complied with, there's not an effective system to make them comply. So there's no real coercibility. That's an issue that has to be worked through. It has a lot to do with people's cultures, so being honest about your income in first stance, which will be difficult if the country's people don't trust their government. Essentially,
Okay.
government, like countries where people fully pay their taxes or have a higher compliancy rate of paying their taxes and complying with their fiscal obligations, really believe that their money is going forth to good use. So see countries such as Norway, such as Sweden, they have exaggerately high taxes. Like they pay a crazy amount of taxes. However, they feel that their money is being put on to good use. They see their streets being cleaned and no potholes and um, all the street lamps working and their system actually working how it should work. Developing countries such as Mexico, such as India, we really have no impulse to pay taxes if we see that
Yeah.
the few money that we're actually giving them is not being put to good use, and then we're falling into all of this news about corruption, about government keeping the money for themselves and growing in greed. And so the citizens will really have no impulse to seeing, hey, this is our collective money being put to good use, because if we pay our taxes, we will have better streets, we will have better lighting system, we will have better public transportation. Why? Because they actually don't see it being put into place. So if the government doesn't prove itself as a reliable government, people will have absolutely no interest in giving their money to someone they don't trust.
So that was all for today, and all my questions are answered, as well as I I hope it was a good discussion.
It was very interesting. I was very glad to be here.
I'm same here that I'm very glad you are a law student, and it was very much easier that you could understand being a law student.
It was very fun. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
having me over.
Thank you very much for coming. And before you go, I just want you to describe what you do, and like you are a law student, but what do you practice in law, and
I'm a
where do you
Mexican
see
law
the future?
student.
Yeah. So, uh, thanks for being here. I hope we interact again on some different topic
Thank you very much.
that that happens in Mexico, and we have a discussion on that in future.
I would love to. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.